Looks like we're starting off tonight's video with our little guest. He snuck in too fast. But I'm going to dive into the second bucket because the first bucket is all bagged up. All the contents are all bagged up. So we have some that are loose. So that would be easier for me to go over, to pick through, and etc. etc. I have a few minutes tonight, and just mild handling is okay with these. They don't chip, although they probably do get little surface wear, rubbing against each other this way, but it doesn't affect what we're looking at. We're looking at edges. I mean, they can chip too, but they're not rubbing in that way mostly. They're mostly rubbing in this way. Okay, so let's see. I tried to clear my throat before I started tonight so I won't be hacking and coughing during the video. Yeah, we got a lot of loose points in this bucket. Okay, so let's see. What are you doing? No, it's time to leave. Look, see? Time to leave. Okay. Alrighty, what do we got here? These are early stage stuff. Now don't start licking yourself over there. I saw you in the last video, or one of the last videos, while I was editing. Sneaky. Let's see. Yeah, I've got some good thinness on this one here, and it does look like it's a preliminary stage because the base and the stem, the base is the very bottom, so I get confused. The stem here is aligned in this direction, which means we have a lot of mass to be removed here on this side. Now, was this broken during the manufacturing or the thinning part of the manufacturing? Yes, I do think so. I don't think this is a drop or something like that. I'm going to take a measurement of the ratio. The best I have in a natural artifact is 9:1, I think. I say natural artifact. The best I have in an artifact is 9:1, I think. Oops, I didn't even check. 55, let's say 56 by, not including the little bump, it's about 6 into 56 is probably 9:1, right? I think maybe that's 54. 6 into 56, 6 into 48 is 8. And 54, yes, about 9:1. Good guess, huh? Yeah, and I did not measure that ahead of time. Now, modern knappers get them thinner with abo or natural tools. You can get them thinner than 9:1. Modern knappers do it. But back in the day, it's not necessary to get it that thin unless you're making a ceremonial piece, it seems, like the large bifaces, like the Sweetwater biface. I shouldn't say large biface, but those very well-made bifaces, ultra thins and so forth. But 9:1 seems to be the wall they're hitting with the normal tools, with the normal points. Okay. And they do, probably on purpose, because you don't want them too delicate. You can't use them for anything rough. Maybe you can use them, yeah, but you cannot shoot them at anything with any reliability. You just get one shot. You can't stab anything with it because you just might get one stab. You at least want to be able to reuse it maybe as a knife later. You don't want it to snap right directly in the middle, stuff like that. Okay. So this is also looks like a preliminary stage because not many artifacts have a base that looks like this. It's either more concave or more square. But I mean, it could be. They could have broke it in the process of thinning the blade after finishing the stem, but the stem does not look completely finished. As far as shape goes, as far as the napping goes, it looks finished as far as the napping. So it may be just a broken piece and not broken in manufacture. Now let's take a closer look at this one here. Some guys have a good enough eye that they can tell which flake was removed last and which was responsible for the break. If it exists on this side, it may be on that other piece that we don't have the flake that was responsible for the breakage. Or it could have had an existing crack, or it may have opened up from a weak spot. There's a crystal pocket there. They obviously had some issue with it earlier. So I wanted to linger on this piece because I think some of this flaking can be explained with indirect punch napping, but some of it I think is billet napping, but not in the usual sense. I'm thinking this faceted billet technique is what is producing these thinning flakes. Because when this technique works, it works extremely well with a faceted billet and an isolated platform built in a certain way. Right? It's the easiest way to remove a flake, I've found. It doesn't always work though, but it is the easiest way to get the flake to initiate, to isolate it and hit it with a faceted percussor, either stone or something else hard like antler or bone. Antler, bone, ivory, stone, that sort of thing. Something that'll drag. If you're just tuning in, a faceted billet is intended to drag along the surface or along the edge while removing the flake. It's not a short grab. It's supposed to drag and linger, so to speak. And it's advantageous to keep this well flattened so that you don't get too many snags while you're trying to swipe. I call it swiping. Okay. So I'm getting into this technique where I'm swiping. Later on I'll get into the punching, vertical punching that perhaps was done on these notches here. I'm thinking most of this notch work is done with pressure. Even if you see a very large pressure flake, I think they were using a lot of heavy pressure. It's not that difficult on this kind of stuff to produce a large flake with pressure. But some of them are just very powerful. So, punch work seems to be what was used at least some of the time. Okay. But I'll be getting into that vertical punch work eventually, or vertical pressure work. But after all these years of indirect percussion, I'm thinking that maybe the faceted billets are the key to reproducing these thinning flakes at this stage. Okay, let's move on to the other ones. And yeah, I do think indirect percussion was combined with all this, so at various stages you would use indirect percussion. Maybe not in all cases, right? Not every culture would use it. Punches, as we saw in the Nolans, a lot of that work looks like it was just strictly hammerstone or strictly billet work, nothing else. This looks like a snapped finished point. Let me zoom in for the rest of these. It's a well-worn edge. It does feel a little bit sharp. It does not feel ground down or anything. Probably resharpened a little bit, but that twist or the bevels look like they were done at the beginning. The major beveling work looks like it was early, with just slight retouch later on. Maybe one resharpening, I don't know. Depends on how they're sharpening their edges to begin with. I'm not going to discuss what each of these point types is. I have another set of artifacts from my friend Guillermo, and he has been waiting for me to analyze them. I need to get those out soon, when I'm still in the mindset of looking at artifacts, and on those I probably will do the research on what they are. Okay. In fact, that's what I think I promised anyway. Yeah, I think this is a lateral dart point, and the criteria that I use is the width of the stem, the neck here within the stem. The width of the neck, if it looks too large for an arrow, it's a lateral dart point. But you can see there's quite a range in these different lateral dart points. Like these two here are probably at lateral dart points, not arrow points. I don't have any of the other arrow points out, but just a comparison. It's an arrow point there. This is not a real one, right? You saw it in an earlier video, or I showed it in an earlier video. This is the neck here is probably the most narrow that you would have on a true arrow point. But just to illustrate the point, or illustrate the difference in the stems and neck width, there's quite a difference between an arrow point and a lateral dart point. Okay, but the size difference between lateral dart points is enormous in many cases. So let me see if I can find something that looks like an lateral dart point, to me anyway. Right here. These all look like lateral dart points, but there's a big range. You know, you'll see impact damage on these larger ones, same as these smaller ones, presumably from flying through the air and hitting something. Now these, when you get to these much larger ones, it would make more sense to use them as knives. To our eyes, although they could have been throwing some of these too. Well, I know that they were, because you can find impact damage on things that you would not even consider throwing in our modern minds. Okay, so here we go. We got some different colors. This is a sticker residue. It's not calcium deposit. Used to be a big fat sticker on here. What kind of sticker, you ask? One of these things. Where is it? One of those things. Identifying sticker because it was sitting on an examination table. And in some kind of lab, archaeology lab, hopefully, with a bunch of mad archaeologists poring over them and looking at them and imagining what type of fiction they want to write. Okay. Yes, I said fiction. Alright, so Lots of breaks in the stem, on this one. Probably resharpened, right? Right? You agree with me, right? Right. I say right a lot. We got classic looking impact damage here, so this is probably the bottom, and that's probably the top, which would be distal and proximal. All right, new vocabulary words for today, boys and girls. We don't want vocabulary, we want artifacts. Just look at them. In fact, just shut up while you turn them and show them in 3D. Now, I get like responses to that voice. What is that voice? Well, then no one asks me what that voice is, right? Which is funny in itself. Anyway, some people say it's self-deprecating. Some people consider it like a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing. I'm going back and forth with different aspects of my personality. No, I'm imitating people that I've encountered in forums and people that I argue with. I don't argue with people that I like. Well, sometimes I do, but not usually, right? If I'm arguing with someone, it's because I don't mind the conflict between us. And so I get these troll responses like that. They start getting defensive, or I expose myself as being abrasive, and they shoot back, or they push back, or whatever the cultural term is, right? Pushback, I think, is what they use these days. I get some pushback, and that's what they sound like if I were to put a voice on them. Okay? And I put that in here just to make it more interesting, because there's another perspective in many cases on this stuff, even though it might be silly. So that's what that is. I call it a troll voice because a lot of times it's just annoying on purpose. You know, trolls a lot of times are annoying on purpose, not to learn anything, but just to get the reaction from somebody. Okay, so here we go. I don't know what this is. It looks like a flake tool. I'm trying to figure this out while I'm explaining the troll voice. It looks like a flake tool because it's wonky for one. It's curved. I wouldn't haft it onto a dart or even a knife handle because it's really wonky. It looks like it may have been at one time, an oval shaped. Oval shaped, but smaller version with a little needle tip, and used for some sort of cutting, meat cutting probably, right? Although plant cutting was very common also. I have not seen many studies on plant cutting with stone tools, but there is a lot of artifacts with seeming plant matter polish on some of them. Now this one doesn't seem to have it. You can see plant matter polish on the edges when it exists. That's very noticeable. This one, I don't think any of these have it that I've seen so far in all of my artifacts that I've shown so far on this channel. Heavy wear from cutting plants or plant matter. Right, I think they may have been using some other type of tool for that, some other type of stone, perhaps, or just not cutting it in a hard state. Maybe they roast the vegetables or plants first and then cut, and that's much easier to process that way. But it looks like it's broken somehow during use. I don't think it was discarded. I think it was a camp tool. It might be heat damage, but I doubt it. It looks like they tried to repair the bottom, or that just flaked a little bit there. I don't know. I just think this is a camp tool for cutting meat or something. All right. Or, maybe just one simple operation, gutting a fish and removing the intestines. Because you want to eat the heart and the lungs from the fish. You just remove certain parts. For fish, that's very handy right there. The little needle tip to start your gutting from a certain location that shall not be discussed on the fish's anatomy. And you just slice up the belly and you're all set. You do many that way without damaging that tool at all. Okay. So let me see. This one, I don't know, too fragmented, but it's, the width can still be measured on this. It still has value because you get the width. And, even though you don't know the type, you can get an average on how wide a lot of these were. Impact damage for sure. It's very thick. If I were to make a lot of lateral dart points, I would make them like this, thick, with percussion only. I don't see any pressure work. And make a bunch and not worry about throwing them. Because I can make one in 10 minutes or less, right? This does have apparent heat damage. Now, one thing I haven't discussed is I have chipped artifacts like this that look, they don't have heat damage that I can see in it. And I chip it to see if it feels like it's heat treated. Some of them, yes, they feel definitely heat treated. But as I was telling Zach, I can't. A lot of times I can't tell. Most of the time I cannot tell if it's heat treated or high quality or partially heat treated, because sometimes a heat treated piece will feel the same as a higher grade of the same material. It's the same material, except it varies from cruddy to good, and you heat the cruddy and it becomes just like the good. The only way you can tell for sure is the color difference, if there is a color difference. If not, it's almost impossible to tell. Sometimes I can tell because I've been knapping certain heated stones over and over and over, and I get the feel for it. And if I take an artifact like this that has no apparent value as far as examining it, I might chip a little piece off if it's mine. I'm not going to chip these that I borrowed, that's for sure. But if my own artifacts that I possess, I'll chip some off and see. And I was collecting a batch of those. But what happened was, there's no way for me to prove that when I'm chipping it, it was easier. How do you know that? You don't really know. And how do you know it's more glossy? I think it's more glossy, but it could be that the whole thing was glossy to begin with, and it has a patina, and I chip a piece off and I'm saying it to you, it's more glossy. Well, yeah, it's more glossy because there's a patina on it. That sort of thing. But I think it's more glossy because I've seen this type of stone over and over again, and it's not this glossy from the chip that I've done. And I can explain that on video, but it's not that believable. It's not compelling because of the possibility of a patina and that sort of thing. I like to have a more compelling argument, because then I fall into the same trap as the people I criticize online. People I criticize online don't have strong arguments, in my view. So I do put forth weak arguments sometimes, but I try not to. Hope I'm not being weak in my explanations on some of these artifacts, or I shouldn't say some, but on all of them. I hope I'm not being weak as far as my explanations. I can let these speak for themselves. You can turn off the volume and they'll speak for themselves. You don't have to listen to my narration. It'd be better, man. Don't want to listen to you. And that sort of thing. So this one looks like a Pandale. even though the blade is straight. Not all pandales were twisted, right? But I don't know. Maybe not. But yeah, not all pandales are twisted, but this one, it's hard to tell. I think pandales have a shorter stem, but I could be wrong. It's a little bit ground down here. These thick points are nice because very rugged. This is what I consider to be a very utilitarian, very nice point. 25 by 7. I don't know. Between 3 and 4 to 1. It does look like some pressure work on this one, so it's not a Nolan, right? I don't think. Yeah, so you can tell the difference between pressure work to develop the stem and percussion work to develop the stem, if you remember some of the previous videos. Let's see. Oops. I don't want to hear the clinking. I want to make sure I'm being delicate with these. Where are the Nolans? I don't know. Dang it. Anyway, the Nolan stems are apparently developed with percussion because they have steep bevels with common percussion mistakes. This looks like it's all pressure to shape it. So I don't think it's a Nolan, and maybe not a Pandale, maybe something else. Okay. All right, so I got a phone call as usual. I got to go. I'll continue this on the next segment if I have time tonight. If not, the next segment will be uploaded tomorrow. Okay.